Amplify your career through training and development solutions specifically designed for federal government professionals. From courses to help you attain or retain certification, to individualized coaching services, to programs that hone your leadership skills and business acumen, Management Concepts optimizes your professional development. Online, in person, individually, or groups, it's training that's measurably better. Learn more at managementconcepts.com. That's managementconcepts.com.
Listen to Joe. He covers it all.
The Joe Kelley Show on WDBO.
Man, I'm so glad you are joining us here this afternoon for your drive home on a Thursday. Can you believe it? It's 81 degrees right now. 81 degrees. That's about 10 degrees cooler than it has been at this hour. Of course, the early rain and the storms really helped, and the cloud cover has really helped keep things a bit more cool today, which is awfully nice. I know I'm enjoying this cooler weather. Laurel, have you been outside yet today?
Yeah, for just a little minute. I went to go put gas in my truck, and yeah, it was much nicer than it has been lately.
Feels kind of nice today. All right, well, if you'd like to join our chat group, we've got the whole thing is on video. If you want to see the Joe Kelley Show and our cast of characters behind the scenes, including Laurel and Paul Cross, you can see it right now. It's on the WDBO Facebook page, and you can join our group there. We've got a really special group of people. And I know sometimes special is a euphemism for ding-dongs and dorks, but I don't mean it in this case. I mean, they're really neat people. We've got some really neat people that join us in the chat room every day, and we have our own conversations in the chat room. Sometimes it's way off topic. Sometimes it's way on topic. It can be a mixed bag, but it's a lot of fun, and I know that a lot of you are driving at this hour, and it's kind of tough, but if you're not driving, or when you get home later, if you want to be able to watch it, check it out. It is on the WDBO Facebook page. We have a lot of stuff to cover today. Once again, the world really never disappoints. There's always plenty of news to talk about. Coming up at about 5:25, we're going to break down all the headlines that you missed while you were at work today. If you were down in the mine, if you're out on the factory floor, if you're in the cubicle farm and you just didn't get a chance to hear all the breaking news stories throughout the day today, don't worry, or as Sean says, let not your heart be troubled. Actually, I think the Bible says that. Let not your heart be troubled. We will have the headlines for you that you missed today coming up at 5:25 here on the Joe Kelley Show. So we can either start out talking about manatee sex, or we can talk about back-to-school necklaces. Which would you rather talk about? Laurel, I'll leave it to you. Paul just did a total facepalm with that one. So manatee sex or back-to-school necklaces?
You're so excited about the manatees. Let's get the manatees out of the way.
I just find this to be really interesting. Okay, so then just a heads up. We're going to talk a little bit about sex, okay? So if you do have the kiddos in the car, which why would you have the kiddos in the car? School doesn't start until August 10th, so it's not like you're picking the kids up. You're probably alone in the car. But evidently a manatee died at the Mote Marine Laboratory and Aquarium in Sarasota, Florida, and it died several months ago. And so we're just now finding out how the manatee died. Now, normal causes of death for manatees. Laurel, once again, you are our chief animal correspondent. Normal deaths for manatees are caused by what?
Boat propellers, habitat loss, lack of food.
Yep. Or too cold, maybe.
Yeah.
If it gets too cold.
Right.
That's not a good condition for a manatee. Well, evidently in this case, this manatee died from a sexual encounter with the manatee's brother at the aquarium. So Hugh, the manatee's name is Hugh, and the manatee's brother is named Buffett. So Hugh, by the way, evidently the manatee passed this week. I thought it was, no, it wasn't this week. This is just bad writing is what this is, NBC News. It died on April 29th. Hugh was 38 years old. What is the lifespan of a manatee? Hey, Google, what is the lifespan of a manatee?
50 to 60 years. On the website manateepr.org, they say manatees are thought to live 50 to 60 years in the wild.
Wow.
Carolinas or as far west as Louisiana during the summer months.
Did you guys know
Manatees
that?
inhabit the shallow,
Okay.
marshy
That's
coastal
enough.
areas and rivers
Stop.
of the Caribbean
Hey, Google,
Sea and the Gulf
stop!
of Mexico.
Hey, Google, stop. Yes, Paul?
Did you hear that she pronounced that as manatee, manatee.org or manatee.org?
Oh, no. No.
She just said, according to the website manatee.org instead of manatee. So that was kind of
We have a new person in our chat, so everybody welcome Eliu Guzman. So we're glad you're joining us. Thank you very much for joining us.
And what a great topic to join us on.
Yeah, manatee. This is going to be heterosexual ancestral sex that killed the manatee. I mean, how often do we get to talk about heterosexual, incestual manatee sex? I left out a word. I'm sorry. How often do we get to talk about fatal manatee, homosexual, incestual sex? Not very often. I've been on the radio for 40 years, and not once has this opportunity presented itself to me. This is my very first time. Very excited about this. Sex between male manatees, even brothers, according to the University of California Davis School of Veterinary Medicine, sex between male manatees, even brothers, is far from uncommon. They are not too meticulous about who their partners are. Reminds me of college. Not too meticulous about who your partners are. They according to this doctor from UC Davis, they just have this kind of sexual urge, and they'll engage in activity with whomever seems to be in the area. Right? College? Does that not seem like college? And if it's a female, great. If it's not, meh. What are you going to do? If they're
minus the 12-pack of beer for the college reference.
Yeah.
But,
So the doctor goes on to say, but if there are not enough females around, or there are only males around, they may express that sexual behavior on whatever individual may be in the vicinity. Golly. These sound like rapist manatees. I mean, they whatever individual. I don't like the fact that the doctor uses the word individual. I would like to believe that at least they're going to be manatees. Right? I mean, we don't want to find out that some snorkeler is down there, and next thing you know, the manatee is doing the thing. Look, man, this is a news story. I don't know what you're laughing about. This is a news story. So
this is the kind of earth-shattering news that people missed while they were working today.
No. That's coming up at 5:25.
Okay, I was going to say.
No, this is the garbage. This is the throwaway stuff. The important stuff comes at 5:25. This is just the stuff that amuses me. And in fact, so they did a necropsy on the manatee. Necropsy is an autopsy on animals. They did a necropsy on the animal, on the manatee, and they said it had a torn colon. A 14.5 centimeter long tear in the ventral wall of his colon. Now, I don't know what 14 centimeters is. We don't do the metric system here. What's 14 centimeters?
I don't
and you know
what 14 centimeters is or not.
It's 5.5 inches.
5.5 inches, thank you. Oh, that's a pretty good-sized tear in a colon wall, one would think. Why don't we have the metric system here in the United States? Now, you don't remember this, Laurel, but back during the Carter administration, we used to have a president named Carter who, by the way, he is still alive. Hospice care, but he's still alive. And we tried the metric system back in the 1970s. And, Paul, did it take? No, it didn't take. We changed some of the signs on the side of the roads to read, it would say 55 miles per hour and then however many kilometers per hour at the same time.
Which is like 110, and so people got that very confused.
Very confused. And honestly, I would vote for the next presidential candidate whose platform is changing the United States to the metric system. I think in the 1970s when Jimmy Carter tried this, it was too early. We were not ready for the metric system because we didn't have the World Wide Web. Well, now there aren't borders anymore. I mean, yes, there are borders, and they're worth fighting for, so don't misunderstand me. But they're just with the internet, the advent of the World Wide Web, We are now a global marketplace. We're no longer just dealing with American states buying and selling goods and services. We are dealing with China. We're dealing with India. We're dealing with Vietnam, Indonesia. We're dealing with all these other nations that are building things for us, making things for us. They're part of our economy. And why aren't we on the metric system? I do think it is time. I think it is time to reintroduce the metric system. You know what? We could even just pretend like it didn't happen in the 1970s. We just make no reference to it whatsoever. We don't want to say that this effort has failed previously in the United States. So we'll just erase that from our history. But
have you ever seen a map of the world that shows where the metric system is and where the
imperial system is?
Yeah. Have you ever seen a map of the world? It's remarkable that we are one of maybe 2 or 3 places in the whole world that still use the old.
And I know that there is an arrogance. There is a point of pride that we are the part of the imperial system rather than the metric system. But I think it's time to cast that aside, and I think we should go to the metric system. I think we need to convert everything to the metric system, because even these days, a lot of shipping companies and stuff like that, they've already converted everything to metrics. It's the rest of us that have not converted things to metrics. So what do you guys think? 844-580-WDBO. It's 844-580-9326. You can use the open mic in the WDBO app. Aren't you with me on this one? Come on. Everybody's with me on this one, right? We want to convert to the metric system so that next time we hear about 2 manatees having homosexual, ancestral, fatal sex, and we hear that the necropsy has a 14.5 centimeter long tear in the ventral wall of the colon, that we'll know how long of a tear 14.5 centimeters are. We want that, don't we, as a nation? 844-580-WDBO. It's 844-580-9326. Also, coming up in a few minutes, I'm going to tell you about the back-to-school necklaces. It is much more insidious than it sounds. It is much more dangerous than it sounds. It is much more troublesome than it sounds. If you hear your children talking about a back-to-school necklace, that could pose problems, and that might be a warning sign, a red flag from your child. In fact, I'm taking my kids back to school shopping on Saturday, and I will have my ear to the ground for anybody mentioning a back-to-school necklace, because a back-to-school necklace doesn't mean what it sounds like it means, and I'll get to that coming up just after 5:30 here on the Joe Kelley Show. Now, we do have a launch scheduled for tonight. SpaceX Falcon Heavy rocket to launch tonight. The Jupiter 3, which is a school bus-size Hughes communications satellite. It is said to be the largest communications satellite ever constructed. It's the size of a school bus. So they need a big rocket. So it's going to be the SpaceX Falcon Heavy, which is the SpaceX traditional booster rocket with 2 side booster rockets. Now, in this case, the main stage booster will not be recovered. It's going to drop down into the ocean, and sayonara. Goodbye to that one. But the first 2 boosters are going to come back and land at landing zones 1 and 2 at Cape Canaveral, which means at about 11 o'clock or 11:08, 11:09 tonight, you might well be asleep. If this rocket launches, by the way, I should point out that it was supposed to launch last night, and it was scrubbed with 1 minute and 5 seconds left on the countdown, and NASA never did explain, nor did SpaceX explain why they stopped the launch last night, but they did. So the backup launch time is tonight, and that'll be just shortly after 11 o'clock, but those first 2 boosters are coming back to landing zones 1 and 2, not on a barge out in the Gulf, but they're going to be landing back on Earth, back on the planet, back on land. So those 2, as they come back, will absolutely trigger 2 sonic booms when they come back. And for those of you who are going to be asleep at like 11:08, that may well jar you out of bed tonight. All right, what is a back-to-school necklace? We'll have that for you. Plus, coming up next, all the headlines you missed while you were at work today. That's coming up next on The Joe Kelley Show.
Amplify your career through training and development solutions specifically designed for federal government professionals. From courses to help you attain or retain certification, to individualized coaching services, to programs that hone your leadership skills and business acumen, Management Concepts optimizes your professional development. Online, in person, individually, or groups, it's training that's measurably better. Learn more at managementconcepts.com. That's managementconcepts.com.
This is WDBO 107.3 FM and AM 580, Orlando's news and talk.
Oh, I'm so glad you're joining us here on this Thursday afternoon. Now, this is our new segment, our new feature. This time of day, every day. If you've been at work all day and you might have missed, you weren't able to listen to the radio station, you weren't able to watch TV, you weren't able to get online, you had things to do, you had stuff you had to sell, you had stuff that you had to do at work today. So we're going to share with you all the headlines that you missed while you were at the office today. We'll start with a derailment of an Amtrak train in Montana that killed 3 people in 2021. We now know the cause of the crash from 2021. It was caused by poor track conditions at the accident site. All right. July is on track, as you heard Laurel report just a little while ago. July is on track to be the Earth's hottest month on record. The planet enters now an extended period of exceptional warmth. And Laurel, how did you say that they were measuring that?
Yeah, how was I saying they were measuring that? Hold on now.
What's the water temperature?
Yeah.
They got those things. What's it called?
It's called a buoy.
Yeah, boy. All right. So from now on, you got to say it that way.
Great.
New research suggests this is a stretch, if you ask me. New research, this according to the Washington Post, new research suggests social media does not fuel political polarization. Does that seem impossible to believe to you? That seems impossible to believe to me. I think social media exacerbates political polarization, not makes it less problematic. I think everybody just goes on social media. I love seeing political arguments on social media because you can't win political arguments on social media. Fox Business reports the biggest U.S. electrical grid operator issues an energy emergency alert as temperatures soar. This as the Supreme Court clears the way for construction of what's called the Mountain Valley Pipeline. It's a controversial new natural gas pipeline. It's a victory for Senator Joe Manchin and President Biden. It's going to go through the Virginias. Alabama police are seeking 2 misdemeanor charges against Carly Russell. Carly Russell, Laurel, is the woman who, reported a baby in the street.
Yeah, so she called her family and said, there's a toddler on the side of the road. I'm going to go get it. And then they heard her scream, and then she, quote unquote, disappeared. And the family went on social media and begged for help to find her. And then she claimed she was abducted, only to admit later she faked it.
Why would someone do something like that? I mean, are you that desperate for attention that you're gonna waste police resources like that? That is I hope they throw the book at her. Also, The Hill is reporting former President Trump is bracing for a third possible criminal indictment this year as the Washington grand jury meets to review evidence in special counsel Jack Smith's probe. And finally, here in Orlando, Orange County, if you're looking for an appliance, a truck, some equipment, Orange County might have just what you need. The Orange County Comptroller's Office is holding one of the biggest online auctions in county history. They're going to be selling drones, arcade games, used cars, and more. Those are the headlines you missed while you're at the office today. Coming up next, why you need to be worried if you hear your kids talking about needing to get a back-to-school necklace. That's next.
This is WDBO 107.3 FM and AM 580, Orlando's news and talk. talk and discussion on the latest breaking national news.
Crude oil prices continue to fall.
Local news.
You're not going to have Disney have its own government in Central Florida.
And stories that matter to you. Use the open mic in the WDBO app and let your voice be heard on the Joe Kelley Show.
So I like to summon my Google if there's a question that I don't know the answer to, but evidently there are repercussions for summoning Google while I'm on the air.
Hey, Joe, you're triggering my Google.
Sorry about that. I know if I say, hey, and then the G word, I know that'll trigger people's things. And if I say the A word, that'll also trigger people's things. And then if I say the S word, hey, S word, that'll similarly trigger things. So we have to be careful what we say on the radio, lest we take over your electronics there at your house. All right, Laurel, you've got kids. Paul, you've got kids. Have you guys ever heard of a back-to-school necklace? Does that ring a bell at all with you?
No, but you certainly have me worried about it.
Yeah, I had never...
My wife's a school teacher, too.
And does she know the term?
Has come around the mill, yeah.
It has, all right. I never heard this before, but effectively, a back-to-school necklace is a noose. It's a noose. And so if you hear your kids talking about getting a back-to-school necklace, you should be concerned about your children's mental health. In fact, you might even want to pull your kids aside and ask them about back-to-school necklaces. Of course, I'm not a therapist. Your mileage may vary as to whether or not you want to initiate that discussion with your kids. But according to Yahoo News, if you hear students discussing back-to-school necklaces, it's important to note they're not talking about a piece of jewelry. Instead, it's a troubling phrase you might hear in conversation or see on social media. And the Urban Dictionary defines a back-to-school necklace as another name for a noose. This is due to the utter despair that some people feel when school starts back up again. You know, that's interesting. I remember when I was in school, I loved I was that nerdy kid who loved school. I couldn't wait for school to start back up. It's kind of like actually being on the radio. I am one of those weird guys that on Sunday nights, I don't get the Sunday blues. I don't get the Sunday doldrums of like, oh, I got to go to work tomorrow. I get the Sunday glee. I'm like, hey, I got to go to work tomorrow. I mean, seriously. Everybody should work in radio. It's the most fun one could possibly have and earn a paycheck at the same time. But be mindful of this. I was completely unaware of this. And like I said, I'm taking my kids back to school shopping on Saturday. I asked my daughter, where do you want to go shopping? And she said the Mall at Millennia. I'm like, oh, not the Mall at Millennia. How many discount stores do they have at the Mall at Millennia?
Just going to say, you're going to be spending some money, I think.
They have nice stores there, right?
Yeah, it's all pretty high end.
Don't they have like a cover charge just to get into the Mall at Millennia? Isn't it like $100 just to get in?
That's after you valet your car.
Oh, my gosh.
But they have the real Santa Claus there.
That's true.
Not this time of year they don't.
Well, eventually they will.
We'll see.
Ever heard of Christmas in July, you little party pooper?
I have not ever heard of that. So Samantha Westhouse is a psychotherapist and maternal infant health social worker. I'm not entirely sure what that is. She says if you're going to talk to your kids, start off by saying, hey, I heard about this thing called back-to-school necklaces. Do you know anything about that? She says, I think it's an open conversation that is always beneficial. It's always important to refrain from judgment so your child feels comfortable sharing how they're feeling. So would you initiate that discussion with your kids? I'm curious.
You know, most of the time, no. I wait until she brings something like that up.
Yeah.
But I don't know. With all the mental health issues these kids are going through nowadays, I might be tempted to.
I got to tell you, our kids, and when I say our kids, I don't mean necessarily my kids. I just mean America's children these days are going through a greater mental health crisis than I think any of us possibly understand, adults. And I think they're going through a greater mental health crisis than they ever have before in in their lives. And I think that is obviously very regrettable and something that needs to be addressed.
The Joe Kelley Show on WDBO.
Paul Cross checks our drive here on a Thursday afternoon, and it's been one of those rainy weather weeks, though at the moment we're just seeing some light showers up in Seminole County, and that's about it.
Well, we have a lot of things going on right now, Joe. Multi-vehicle crash, I-4 westbound before Lee Road. I just put a push alert on the WDBO app there for you. This is right before Lee Road. 3 left lanes are blocked. You just had a medical crew show up as well. That's tying up traffic way now. Before you get to Altamont Springs, you're going to find the delays there. Again, I-4 westbound. We also have a wreck on John Young Parkway northbound after the 528 and on 535 southbound before World Center Drive. From the WDBO Triple Team Traffic Center, I'm Paul Cross.
844-580-WDBO. It's 844-580-9326. You can use the open mic in the WDBO app. We just got this news in just a moment ago. We're now told that SpaceX has scrubbed tonight's launch attempt. So for the second night, they're scrubbing the launch attempt tonight. Did we get a reason why? Did they give any kind of rationales to why they scrubbed tonight's launch? No reason given. Okay, so they scrubbed last night, and now they have scrubbed tonight's launch, which for those who are planning on staying up late and driving out to the coast to see it, now at least you can go to bed on time and don't need to worry about staying up too late tonight. So now this is good. They're going to shoot for 11:04 tomorrow night, so at least tomorrow night, it's a Friday night, and then Saturday night is their backup opportunity after that. So 11:04 tomorrow night, and if that doesn't work, and this is... I get SpaceX trying to be a little bit conservative on this and SpaceX taking extra caution because, if nothing else, of the sheer volume, the size of this satellite being as big as a school bus, they want to make sure that the conditions are exactly perfect. I would imagine that the price tag is considerably more than a school bus on this particular communications satellite. All right, we're still having some people wanted to talk about the manatees.
Go swim with the manatees, they said. It'll be fun, they said.
Yeah, you got to be careful, evidently. And then, I don't know how we got on it. I'm pretty sure it's Laurel's doing, but we're talking about the metric system and how we would all of us would like to finally convert the imperial system to the metric system here in the United States.
I hate to inform you, but if we cannot even teach our school children regular math, we definitely do not need to fry their brains out with a new metric system. They can't handle the normal stuff, much less the new stuff.
And I'm sorry, but isn't the metric system simpler? It's all based upon tens, right? It's ones and zeros. I mean, the metric system seems remarkably simple.
You learn it first and then tell us how easy it is.
What?
You first.
I'm not in school.
Yeah, you're still going to have to learn it if they change everything here, though.
Well, they stopped even teaching cursive and handwriting.
That's a good point.
They don't even teach that anymore.
And typing,
the next generation,
evidently.
Yeah, the next generation's not going to be able to even recognize or read cursive words.
We're going to have to... The people who can read cursive are going to be like people who can read Sanskrit or
And Ronald just piped in, the producer. It's absolutely true. They won't even know how to drive a car, a manual shift car.
Well, they already don't know how to drive a manual shift car. But, every time we say they don't know how to do this or they don't know how to do that, that's our fault, guys. We're the parents. We're the older generation. We're the ones who didn't teach our kids right. So if we're saying our kids are too dumb to be able to handle the metric system, that is our fault.
Joe, it would take an entire lifetime or half a lifetime to learn the metric system for some of these people that are older. Like you and I.
Well, okay, what if we grandfathered us in, right? So we grandfather us in, and we just start teaching the metric system next year, this fall, right, August 10th.
So make them do it, not you.
Right.
They should do it.
We start with kindergartners, and then the next year it's first graders, and then second graders, and then third graders, and then next thing you know, the younger generations all know metric system, and those of us that don't know the metric system, we're grandfathered in, and we don't have to worry about it. I don't accept that our kids can't learn the metric system. I think they can learn the metric system, and we should teach them.
I'm not saying that. I'm saying I don't want to learn it.
I got it.
Exactly. And then it's going to be tough to teach an old dog a new trick with me because it's like I'm too old to learn more stuff to me. I don't want to know that.
I will tell you that I have been on a kick lately of teaching myself new things in my advancing years. I'm 55 now, but I keep teaching myself new things. As an example, I taught myself how to fly a drone. And next thing you know, I go out and I'm an FAA licensed drone pilot. Speaking of which, there was a partial building collapse this week out in Hamlin, Winter Garden. There's a building that's under construction, and one of the walls, they're making it out of cinder block. One of the walls came crashing down. And I flew my drone over it this morning. I got up early this morning, and I flew my drone over it. And if you want to see the video of this partially demolished building, I would have to think someone got fired for this. But I just posted the video on the WDBO Facebook page if you want to see the video of this building that is partially collapsed. In fact, the crews out there this morning were pretty much picking up all the cinder blocks. They were trying to get everything all cleaned up, and I would have to think that OSHA or somebody would have to go out there and take a look at that. I hope nobody got hurt in the collapse of that building, but I got some really good drone video over it. If you want to go check it out right now, just go to the WDBO Facebook page. All right, we'll have more of your open mics and comments coming up straight ahead. You can join me at 844-580-WDBO. It's 844-580-9326. Or use the open mic in the WDBO app. Look for the Joe Kelley Show podcast. Wherever you get your podcast, it's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and everywhere else. Look for the Joe Kelley Show Facebook page. Give it a like, give it a follow. We put all kinds of content up there just for you. So check it out.
The Joe Kelley Show on WDBO. The Joe Kelley Show on WDBO. In-depth segments on topics that matter to Orange, Seminole, Osceola, and all of Central Florida. The Joe Kelley Show on WDBO.
I love your show every night. You're doing great, bud.
So we're talking about, this is kind of weird. We're talking about the metric system, and we're talking about the state of mental health of our kids today. And boy, a lot of people are really pessimistic about our kids today. I'll get to some of those open mics for you coming up in a moment. First, Chris in Deltona is checking in at 844-580-WDBO. Hey, Chris, you're on the Joe Kelley Show. How are you?
Good. How are you, man?
Excellent.
Hey, so I don't know. I thought this may be coincidental, or you have a fan that you didn't know about, and it's really surprising because you really don't like them. But I was driving down I-4, and you know those billboards that, you know, you can see different ads, it's digital?
I'm aware of billboards, yes.
Yes, there's this ad that comes up. Joe Biden's on there, and he's saying he's pledging to convert to the metric system. So,
are you putting me on? Are you putting?
You said you would vote for any president that would.
You're putting me on. All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Shoo! Because that was going to be problematic for sure. Oh my gosh! I started to sweat there, Chris. I'm so glad. So glad that's not the case. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
All right, buddy. Thanks for calling, man. I appreciate that. 844-580-WDBO.
Hey, Joe. The kids that are coming out of high school today or in school today, they're weak, they're fragile, cell phone addicted. Kids that come into my workplace right out of high school, they want a safe space. They want to spend time on their cell phone. It's the parents' fault. There's no more pressure than when we were in school. You know, and it's ridiculous.
I don't know. I beg to differ in that I do think kids today have it harder than we did when we were kids. Just because cell phones alone are a distraction that we didn't have when we were kids. And I think that makes just a gargantuan difference in their lives compared to our lives. Our lives were pretty simple compared to what the choices that kids have in front of them today. We'll get into more of that coming up in the next hour. Stay with us here. It's the Joe Kelley Show here on WDBO.
The Joe Kelley Show on WDBO. Now, WDBO 107.3 FM and AM 580. Triple Team Traffic.
I think at one point I became the get off my lawn guy. I just don't I don't get a lot of things now. We still have that multi-vehicle crash. I-4 westbound before Lee Road. I'm looking at 3 lanes still shut down, and the medical crew still on the scene. This has traffic backed up now to before State Road 436 in Altamont Springs. We also have a crash on 429 southbound just west of I-4. That's in Seminole County. That has that I-4 westbound ramp to 429 closed. From the WDBO Triple Team Traffic Center, I'm no young whippersnapper Paul Cross.
This is WDBO 107.3 FM and AM 580, Orlando's news and talk. News, weather, traffic, all the things you want on your drive home. Plus, Joe Kelley being, well, Joe Kelley. Now, the Joe Kelley Show on Orlando's news and talk, WDBO.
So to the extent that we think that today's school-age kids are screwed up, I'm sorry, but that is our fault. That's our fault. It's not society's fault. It's our fault. It's moms and dads like you and me raising our kids wrong, or raising our kids wrong, and then they raise their kids wrong, or whatever the case may be. We only have ourselves to blame for today's kids that might be struggling with all kinds of problems. And we as moms and dads, I think, have to do a better job about that. And this, let me tell you, if you're just joining us, let me tell you how we got to this part of the discussion. We're talking about this term called a back-to-school necklace. And a back-to-school necklace evidently is a reference to a noose. And it is something that kids have been saying to one another as they get ready to go back to school. They say things like, let me see, where did I see? Here we go. I'm about to buy my back-to-school necklace. I can't wait to get my back-to-school necklace. Thinking about that back-to-school necklace. The back-to-school necklace is calling me. I can't wait to wear my back-to-school necklace. Well, the back-to-school necklace is a reference to a noose. So if your children are talking about a back-to-school necklace, they are talking about the despair that they feel in going back to school. Now, we also brought up the metric system. Don't ask me how we got onto the topic of the metric system, but it had something to do with 2 male manatees having sex with one another. Somehow that triggered a discussion on the metric system. So this is kind of all organically unfolded here with us this afternoon on the Joe Kelley Show. But this open mic troubles me. I don't dislike the guy. I'm not mad at the guy, but I'm troubled by the message of this open mic.
Hey, Joe, the kids that are coming out of high school today or in school today, they're weak, they're fragile, cell phone addicted. Kids that come into my workplace right out of high school, they want a safe space. They want to spend time on their cell phone. It's the parents' fault. There's no more pressure than when we were in school. You know, and it's ridiculous.
So I agree with everything up until that last part where he says it's no more stressful for today's kids than it was when we were back in school. I could not disagree more. Society has become so much more complex than it was when we were in school. Kids used to only be able to bully other kids face to face. Now kids bully other kids through unlimited means, through their cell phones, through social media, through private chat groups, through Snapchat, through Discord, through video gaming. I mean, just video gaming. When we were kids playing video games, we didn't have 10 other people on the game with us that we'd never met before using racial slurs and terrible language. We didn't have that influence when I was a kid growing up. And let me touch on a really sensitive topic, and that is pornography. Pornography is a scourge. Pornography is dangerous. Pornography wrecks relationships. And today's kids have access to pornography on everything. Everything. I remember the first time that I saw, quote unquote, pornography. And I got to take you back to when I was 8 years old. I was 8 years old. We moved around a lot when my brother and I were kids. My father got transferred quite a bit. And we had just moved to Beaverton, Oregon. You guys know what Beaverton, Oregon is famous for, don't you? Laurel, do you know what Beaverton, Oregon is famous for?
All the beavers they have.
No.
Oh.
Paul Cross, do you know what Beaverton, Oregon is famous for?
No, I'm sorry. I don't have a clue.
It is where Nike was founded, and it's where their headquarters is. Nike was founded in Beaverton, Oregon. It's a suburb of Portland, Oregon. So we only lived in Beaverton, Oregon for less than 2 years. I want to say it was even just maybe a year and a couple of months. We did not live there very long, but my experience there as an 8-year-old was traumatic. I hated it. I hated Beaverton, Oregon. It's a beautiful place, but because I was an 8-year-old kid, I didn't like the other 8-year-old kids. And believe it or not, there was a bully that lived on our street. And we all had bicycles. We rode our bicycles everywhere. This bully had a bicycle steering wheel that was made out of chain. It was chain welded together, like you might see on a fancy, not fancy, but on a hot rod car. It was made of chain. This child's bicycle steering wheel was made of chain. He was a bully. I hated that kid. And we had another kid on the street whose family, and I don't remember what their ethnicity was, but this is West Coast, so they were Asian, probably Vietnamese. And I remember this bully would teach this little Vietnamese child. He would flip him off or teach him bad words and say, go home and ask your mom about this. Go home and ask your mom about this word. Go home and ask your mom about that word. Go home and give your mom this finger and it was just terrible. And I just stood there. I was scared to death. Well, those kids got into my house one day. I don't remember if my brother invited them in or if I invited them in. Someone invited them into my house, including the bully with the chain steering wheel. And I don't know what this says about my parents, but back in the day, my parents subscribed to Playboy magazine. And I would watch my mother look through the pages of Playboy as often as my father would. I mean, it was something that both of my parents consumed. They both would read it. And I remember the bully, of all people, the bully found the Playboys that were in my house, in my parents' house. I didn't even know that there were Playboys. He found, and he stole them. He stole them. That was, beyond that, the only access to pornography when we were children were magazines. Magazines that most children would have a hard time getting. Well, today's children don't need magazines to view pornography. And the pornography that is available is the most obscene, dangerous, insidious, sinful pornography that has ever existed. It's violent, it's dangerous, it's humiliating, it is terrible. And today's kids have access to that within a second. So I don't believe that today's kids have it as easy as we did when we were kids. Or I don't believe that today's kids don't have it harder than when we were kids. Today's kids are walking through a minefield every day. And it's our job as parents to help them navigate that minefield. And whether that's the back-to-school necklace or if that's something else, I still think that's on us. That's on us, parents, to help those children and to help them navigate today's challenges. But it seems as if a lot of parents are just willing to give up. Now, that having been said, I'm not confessing to be the best parent. In fact, my biggest regrets in life are times in which I've not been a better parent. I will always regret some of that, dealt through with going through a divorce and everything else like that. I will always regret not having been a better father, always. But we have to step up as parents and do a better job with our children. talking here about the back-to-school necklaces, which is a euphemism for a noose, as kids head back to school and they may be contemplating killing themselves.
Joe, with regard to back-to-school necklaces, I would rather have an awkward conversation with my daughter now than no conversations with her in the future. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think that's a really, really good point. I know that I'm going to see all of my kids this weekend, and I'm taking them back to school shopping, so I'm certain that that's going to come up, and I'm going to bring that up in conversation.
Hey, Joe, talking about the mental state of our kids in school, I blame it on the stupid idiocracy that our schools have became, either in judging and teaching and indoctrination and disciplining and taking action that nobody should take action. They're getting retarded about it. And not only that, social media and the global internet, World Wide Web.
Look, I agree. I agree with you. The schools are failing our kids as well. Society is failing our kids as well. I get that. But as moms and dads, we are the ultimate authority. We are the ultimate deciders in chief. We're the ones who make the decisions. If we think that the schools are teaching our kids wrong, then we have a duty to pull our kids out of that school. Or we have a duty to every day teach our kids the right way after school.
You know, since these kids aren't learning cursive writing, I wonder what the future signatures are going to look like on documents. Plus the fact that if anything goes wrong and the internet goes away, how will they know how to read the Constitution of the United States?
Well, I think they can still read. They'll just have to read it on a different source. Wendy is joining us at 844-580-WDBO. Hi, Wendy. You're on the Joe Kelley Show. Thank you for calling.
Hey, Joe. I was just calling. I'm a former teacher. I retired last spring after 23 years of teaching. And what I would say about the phone situation, I'm also a mother of 4 grown adult children who've left the home, and they had mobile phone availability, but we as parents didn't allow our children to have mobile phones. When they were away from our home and at school, they had the ability to call us if they needed to from the school office. And so as parents, we need to not abdicate our responsibility to the whim of the society who wants to allow our children to see whatever they want to see.
Absolutely. Wholeheartedly agree.
We could also choose to, if they have to have a cell phone, they don't have to have a cell phone that has a smartphone. They can get flip phones still, or phones with just dial things that can get text in them, but you don't have a screen to view the internet. So there are ways as parents that you can control this. We are not helpless.
And I mentioned how accessible pornography can be for kids. The other end of that is how accessible cameras are for kids, because a lot of kids are making their own pornography. A lot of kids are taking their own scandalous pictures. And you know, when we were kids, if you wanted to have a camera somewhere, you literally had to bring a camera with you. And cameras, we just didn't bring cameras everywhere we went when we were kids. But kids these days document everything. They take pictures of all of their bad behavior. They take pictures of their good behavior, but they take pictures of their bad behavior. And they don't understand, or perhaps they don't understand it well enough, that sometimes they're incriminating themselves with some of these images.
Right. Yeah.
Why did you get out of teaching, Wendy? Was it just time, or was there something that was the last straw for you?
Well, I was a private school teacher and then also a public school teacher with Florida Virtual School, and I really enjoyed that role as a teacher. I liked actually as a virtual school teacher, I was able to, I think, get to know my students much better than I did as a in-classroom teacher, because I was talking to them and coaching them in their class. But I'm at retirement age, and so I was ready to retire from my teaching career.
Well, bless you, Wendy, for all of your service to our kids and to our community. You know, I believe our education system is jacked up and a mess, but I don't blame the teachers for that. I think it's much, much higher. I think that teachers are wonderful, in most cases, are wonderful public servants, and they work their fingers to the bones, and I get that. So thank you so much for working so hard for our kids. I'm Joe Kelley. You're listening to The Joe Kelley Show on WDBO.
The Joe Kelley Show on WDBO. The Joe Kelley Show on WDBO. Connected to our community. Talk local issues and events with Joe Kelley. Use the open mic in the WDBO app and let Joe know what interests you. The Joe Kelley Show on WDBO.
Yeah, I'm taking the kids back to school shopping on Saturday, and my daughter's home from college. She leaves soon to go back to the University of Tennessee. And I said, where do you want to go shopping? She said, the mall at Millennia. I was thinking like TJ Maxx or Ross or something like that, the Goodwill store.
Dollar Tree.
Right. I'm gonna have to plan for a different budget, evidently, for that. We're talking about our kids and whether or not our kids are disciplined right. We're talking about the metric system, whether or not we need to convert. Don't ask me why we're talking about the metric system. Suffice to say, we're talking about the metric system.
Joe, I agree that today's world is crazy compared to when I grew up in the 60s and 70s. But I tell you what, schools have a lot to blame for it, because when I was going to school, they could look in your locker. They didn't need a reason. If you acted up in class, you'd hear the licks echoing through the hallways when they the coach gave you a lick in the hallway. There was discipline.
You know, can I see a show of hands? And this is for everybody, whether you're in the chat group, whether you're listening alone in your car right now, or whether you're Laurel or Paul. Can I see a show of hands of everybody who got paddled at least once when they were in school? Laurel's not raising her hand. Paul's not raising her hand. Nicole's not raising her hand. Ronald is not raising his hand. I'm the only one who got paddled. And do you know I'm like the cleanest guy imaginable. I don't cause trouble.
I went to Catholic school.
I'm a rule
and I never
follower.
got ruler, paddle. I never got any. I was a good kid.
I got into a fist fight with a kid in gym class in middle school. And yes, I got paddled by the coach. And that's all it took for me was one paddling. I learned my lesson after one paddling. Don't cause any more problems. But we don't paddle kids anymore in school, do we? And if you paddle your kids at home, you're probably going to, your kids probably feel empowered to call the police, right? So I don't know about paddling kids at home. And even with my 3 kids, I will tell you that I spanked one of my 3 kids one time, and that was it. One time. And again, to be completely honest with you, and that's all I can do with our listeners is be honest, I am real sure that the paddle that I issued was more about my own personal frustration and anger and less about the child misbehaving. So that the paddling didn't get me anywhere with my kids. In fact, I think they're frankly they're great kids. Though I have a lot to discuss with them after this conversation today. 844-580-WDBO.
Hey, Joe. You are right that it's the parents' fault that our kids are stupid. My kids did not get a cell phone put in their hands until they were 18. My son is in the management team at Walt Disney World and works with me. And my daughter is the head nurse at the ER at Halifax and DeLand. They vow, too, also not to put cell phones in their kids' hands, and they don't even have social media or anything. It is our fault.
Yeah, boy, that is. I applaud you. That's a tough thing to pull off with your kids, not letting them have cell phones or social media. But congratulations to you for making that work and spreading that tradition on to your now adult kids, your highly successful adult kids at that. I'm Joe Kelley. We will continue with more of your calls and comments coming up next here on WDBO.
This is WDBO 107.3 FM and AM 580, Orlando's news and talk. Insightful.
You tell the truth from your point of view.
Entertaining.
Man, that guy is a lot taller than he sounds on the radio.
And engaging.
When we hear you on the radio, it's a good thing.
The Joe Kelley Show on WDBO.
So glad you're joining us. Thank you for being a part of the Joe Kelley Show. We've got our video chat group right now on the WDBO Facebook page. If you want to join that, you can see the behind the scenes, the BTS of the Joe Kelley Show here on WDBO. The behind the scenes, you can see what everybody looks like. Paul, Laurel, me, and you can join the chat group. We have a lot of fun. We ask a lot of questions. Somebody asked what the limit is I'm going to set for each kid when I take them back to school shopping on Saturday. Well, if we're going to the mall at Millennia, I could maybe afford to valet park, and that's about it. It's going to be tough after that point. We're talking about disciplining and sometimes spanking your kids. Whit is joining us here on the Joe Kelley Show. Hi, Whit. How are you?
How are you doing, Joe?
Excellent.
Hey, back in the when I was about 30 or 40 years old, I'm 68 right now, but when I was back then, I'll spank my kids. They started a fire in a vehicle. And I was divorced and remarried, so I got 2 stepsons and 2 kids of my own from my first marriage. But anyway, I put them in the bedroom, and I made them pull their pants down, and I whipped their bottoms, and I left welts. And my stepson said, I'm going to call the law on you. And I said, well, put your pants back on because you're not going to talk on the phone half naked. So anyway, he put his pants on. I marched him in the kitchen. I handed him the phone. And I said, before you call, when they come out here, they're going to remove you from the home. They're not going to take me out of the home because I'm the one paying for this home. Once I'm gone, no one's paying for it. And that's what I told my kids. And guess what? They straightened up real quick.
They didn't call the police then?
Nope.
That's interesting.
Nope.
Well, and certainly by today's standards, Whit, I'm sure there's some of our listeners that are shrieking in horror right now based upon what you just described. But for a lot of us, that's just kind of how life went. I mean, I mentioned that I got spanked once in school. I got spanked multiple times from my parents, mostly my mother. My mother was the real disciplinarian. But in school, I only got spanked once, and that was enough for me to learn. Evidently, I was a little thick-headed at home, and it took me more than one spanking to learn.
I got spanked in junior high, and that's all it took for me to learn, too.
Yep.
So.
Yep. Mine was in junior high, and it was a football coach. Of course, it was a football coach. They're the ones that hit the hardest, aren't they? Whit, thank you so much. I'm glad you called. This is an interesting story. Are you guys familiar with, in some states, when you buy aluminum cans, like if you buy a 6-pack of Coca-Cola, or if you buy aluminum cans or bottles, they often charge an extra fee. Say in California, for example, they'll charge you an extra 5 to 10 cents, and it's called California Redemption Value, or CRV. Now, I've lived in a state that has done this before, including California. And the reason why they do this, they charge you an extra 5 to 10 cents up front. But if you return the plastic or aluminum, you get the money back. Okay, so it encourages recycling. It encourages cleaning up the community. Well, a California family that earned millions of dollars by recycling cans and bottles they're now looking at multiple felonies that could lead to years behind bars. 8 family members in Riverside County, California, are accused of defrauding the state by importing used bottles and cans from Arizona. Some 178 tons in 8 months, and then having them recycled in California. The recycling operation earned the family $7.6 million. Damn, y'all, we have the wrong job. We're in the wrong business. We should be in the business of picking up aluminum cans and bottles and taking them to California, which evidently you can't do. It's against the law. So not only had they earned $7.6 million in recycling, investigators found a stash of illegally imported beverage containers worth another $1 million. So bringing it across state line, bringing it from a state that doesn't collect the 5 or 10 cents and taking them to a state that does collect and then pay back the 5 to 10 cents. That's the illegal part. Felony grand theft in California, punishable by up to 3 years in state prison. Redeeming out-of-state containers to the degree that the family is accused of could increase the sentence by another 3 years. Last year, 6 people were charged in a similar Arizona to California recycling operation that prosecutors said netted more than $10 million by fraudulently redeeming more than 9 tons of empty beverage containers. How in the world do people collect 9 tons of empty beverage containers? At least 93 people in California have been convicted of recycling fraud between 2010 and 2019. I bring up this story because, A, I didn't realize that people were crossing state lines to redeem the California redemption value or something. I think they do this in most of the West Coast states. I think they do it in Oregon. I think they do it in Washington as well. But I would love to see something like that on cigarettes. Because I don't know about you, I don't mind cigarette smokers. I don't care if people smoke cigarettes. You do you, baby. That's my motto is you do you. If you want to smoke cigarettes, knock yourself out, smoke cigarettes. But where I draw the line is when people flick their butts out the window like the entire world is your trash can. I would like to see tobacco companies start charging, say, or the states rather, the states, not the tobacco companies, the states start charging an extra 5 cents per cigarette. And that way, smokers or non-smokers who just want the money can pick up all the damn cigarette trash that exists at every intersection, everywhere, every beach, everywhere, every road, everywhere. Cigarette smokers are some pretty rude people in how they litter. But I would love for them to charge more for cigarettes so that they can get cleaned up and not recycled, but at the very least, cleaned up.
The Joe Kelley Show on WDBO. Issues that matter to you.
I make it a point to listen to Joe Kelley when I need to fully understand what's happening in the news.
Now, the Joe Kelley Show on Orlando's News and Talk, WDBO.
Joe, Mark from Winter Garden regarding spanking or not spanking. The bottom line is our kids need to know that there's consequences to their actions because that's how life is. Also, regarding the cell phone, hold out as long as you can. We regret giving our kids cell phones in their early teens. Have a great night.
You know, I was thinking about that. One of the biggest arguments I ever had with one of my kids, this was our adopted son, Joey, when he was probably 16, maybe 15 years old. We gave him a cell phone, and we said it's contingent upon grades. And when we got his grades and they weren't up to snuff, we took his phone away. And honestly, that was kind of like the beginning of I don't want to say the beginning of the end because there's not an end to that relationship, but it was the beginning of the estrangement that we went through for a period of years because taking away a phone from a kid can often have major consequences. I mean, he ran away from home. He literally jumped out of a second-story window. I later told him, I said, dude, look, the front door's unlocked. Don't jump out a window if you're going to run away. Just go out the front door. It's a lot safer that way than jumping out a window. You could break your leg. You could break your back. You could cause all kinds of problems. You could break one of my sprinkler heads in the yard. Don't jump out a window. And he ran away a few more times after that as well. But I think of that when it comes to Orange County because, you know, Orange County is voting on a new cell phone policy. Imagine telling thousands of teenagers you can't have your phones. Can you imagine how all those kids are going to react when they're told they can't have their phones at school? I think there's going to be some pretty disgruntled kids, no doubt about it.
Hey, Joe, that's the root core of what's wrong today. I have not spanked my children since they were little, and I think that 2 of the 3 of my kids got a spanking. The other one didn't. My kids love and respect me and my wife, and it's because we lead by example.
Outstanding. Thank you very much.
To the gentleman who just talked about paddling their kids in school, schools can't do that anymore because of legalities. So maybe you ought to be paddling your kid at home if they really need that sort of thing.
And honestly, I'm of the camp that paddling is unnecessary. I'm not that you can necessarily negotiate with kids, but I generally think we can outsmart kids when it comes to discipline issues. And I just think there's better ways to discipline kids than paddling them. And as I said, of my 4 kids, I usually just say 3, but and not that I forget about my 4th kid. It's just that he was no longer in the household. He hasn't been in the household in a long time because he's 33, 34 years old now. I'm not sure what my point was. I don't advocate paddling. I think there's better ways to discipline our kids besides paddling them.
I feel like parents who give children cell phones way too early means that they just want to shirk their responsibilities. I'm sorry to say that. I know I'm going to make a lot of people mad. I don't think a child needs a cell phone until they're at least 16 and driving. And that would just be for a case of emergencies. Your job is to be a parent. You are there to teach, guide, and instruct. So do it.
Do it. We'll leave it at that tonight. My name is Joe Kelley. Thank you so much for joining us here on The Joe Kelley Show. We're back with you tomorrow afternoon, 5 till 7, right here on WDBO.
Amplify your career through training and development solutions specifically designed for federal government professionals. From courses to help you attain or retain certification, to individualized coaching services, to programs that hone your leadership skills and business acumen, Management Concepts optimizes your professional development. Online, in person, individually, or groups, it's training that's measurably better. Learn more at managementconcepts.com. That's managementconcepts.com.